The video play for you?
The video did play for me indeed.
Okay, awesome. Okay. Sometimes I never know. Like I said, StreamYard, it's acting funny. But hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Comics Della Morte, episode 120, So-Called Living with, not your last name. I don't want to butcher it because I ain't got
It's
my
Maya.
glasses on. Maya? Is that it?
Maya.
No.
Yeah. It's a very popular name for like
Maya.
16-year-old girls.
Okay, Maya. Gotcha. Yeah. Right? But yeah, so before we get into the comic and everything, start off telling people about who you are and, what made you fall in love with the whole.
So you cut out. What made me fall in love with the whole?
Can you hear me?
No, I missed the end of the question. It cut out at the end of the question. What made me fall in love with the
Can you hear me?
whole? I can hear you now.
Is there a delay? Because
All right.
I might have to do this on my phone.
Yeah. There's a bit of a sound delay, and you're cutting out from every once in a while. I blame it on the StreamYard. The duck icon looks suspicious. Anyways, so I'll answer the question. I'm assuming you'll come back, and I hope you can hear me. So as far as comics go, I've been into comics since I was like 13. So that's when I first. I think before that I tried to buy comics when I was younger, but I picked up the wrong comics. I picked up like Daredevil, and it was a little too grown up, and I didn't get it. It was a little too deep for me, for my young mind, when I was like 9 or 10 years old. But when I was 13, I tried it again, and I started with some Spider-Man comics, and that's when it really picked up for me, and I fell in love with comics right away. And I know you mentioned board games, because I have a board game channel, my own Board Game Coffee. That's it's my board game channel. Actually, this is our. I didn't even realize that. This is a Board Game Coffee sweater. Where's our logo? There you go.
Yeah. All right. I had to do it on my phone. I guess it's just my computer that needs to update.
Oh, all right. So we're best. Hey, maybe you can bring your video back on.
My video will be right up in my face. I don't think people want to see that.
All right.
But yeah, so that's awesome. I mean, young kids now, they're more focused on, video games and being online. But, there's just something special about board games, especially the older ones back then.
Oh, for sure. I'm actually I'm currently playing a brand new game that's not actually released to market yet, and I'm in the middle of playing it. As in, I stopped it. We put a pause on it so I can come down, we could talk, and then I'll go back upstairs and play. Saturday night is our board game night.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear that. I feel that, friends, family, they should come together to do that. It's very important, and it's a good social skill and a good way to have family just, spend time with each other, because everybody's just so much in technology and they just need to get away from it once in a while.
Yeah, and it's more than just the gaming for us. Like we we order food, we make drinks, we laugh, we mock each other. It's all good. It's all in good fun. It happens every Saturday night.
Awesome. Glad to hear that. So, you have the show that's dedicated to board games, teaching people how to play the games, but with the comics and everything, besides being a comic book reader, what really made you to take that leap to actually create a comic? Because there's always that moment in someone's like, okay, I feel I have the confidence to do this now.
Well, when I was younger, like when I got into comics, I was an artist, like I am an artist. I mean, but when I was younger, I was always an illustrator, and I wanted to draw and get into comics. But sequential art, wasn't my forte. So
Mhm.
it just took me too long to do a comic book page. And I was really young. Like I was like 14, 15, and I was trying to send, pages to Marvel. And it just wasn't up to par. Like as an adult now, I can look back and be like, wasn't up to par. I was good for like a 14, 15-year-old, but I wasn't good enough to be to go pro. Anyways, as I got older, I thought, well, comics just aren't for me because I got into the video game industry as an artist,
Awesome.
but I thought sequential art's not for me. And then
Yeah.
it occurred to me at some days, like maybe I should just write a script. And I started writing a script. And honestly, when I started writing the script for So-Called Living, which was like 15 or 16 years ago, actually,
Mhm.
I wrote it and I didn't know what I was writing. I didn't know if I was writing a show, if I was writing a book, if I was writing a play I didn't know what it was. So I just kind of started jotting down ideas. I was like, you know what? I think I can make this into a comic book. So, and I decided I'm just going to pull back from the art and I'm just going to be a writer and and so I thought I'm going to get into comic books as a writer. So that
There's
was the
yeah.
initial, that's what encouraged me to get into it.
There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, even with people who aren't good at writing, they're not good at penciling. You have people who are just like grayed out colorist or inkers. That's why I find the comic book industry so great because there's always something for you there if you lack your confidence in somewhere else.
Mhm.
So even letters, people who can't draw or write, they know how to write lettering good, and it's a shame that they don't teach kids cursive that much anymore in schools
Yeah.
because I feel that that's a dying art. And yeah, and I'm seeing in the chats, hello Brittany, that's your wife.
Yeah, that is.
So with you starting to write your comics and everything, did you feel that it was hard for you at first? Because people start to realize that, man, writing comics is kind of hard because I want to have so much go on in one panel, and I have to cut back and be like completely like vague on what I want the text bubble to be because it's just going to take away from the artwork.
I found actually I found that actually I had oh, hi Brittany, I see the text coming in now. I found that for me, I actually didn't have much trouble limiting the dialogue because because I've written for video games before.
Oh,
And
okay,
so I've written
that makes
dialogue
sense.
for video games before. And my dialogue style actually suits comic book really well. I don't do a lot of like long blocks of speech. I'm very much like I say something, you say something. I say something, you say something.
Yeah,
It's I guess it's more closer to the equivalent of like Gilmore Girls. If you ever watch that show where they're like they speak really quick between each other and it's
yeah,
like a lot
yeah,
of like
yeah,
snippy remarks, sarcastic remarks, and and they're
yeah.
like
I,
boom,
I
boom, boom.
know I know Gilmore Girls. I'm gonna be
Yeah.
39 this year. I've seen my stuff. So
So yeah, so I find my writing naturally fit into the comic book style, and I did some test pages. So if you're a writer, you're not sure. I did some test pages.
oh, I
Uh,
do I do everything myself. So yeah.
yeah.
But
Well, if it,
it's hard because it's one of those things like you love certain comic books. Like with me being a horror writer and artist, I love the old school EC comics. But some
Mhm.
of those text bubbles from the EC comics is just such a big long paragraph. So again, it's trying to like, okay, if I'm gonna have like two like a paragraph, the panel has to be like rectangle and be like a far away scene. It can't be like a close up scene.
Yeah, I've actually like I remember being a kid reading. I can't remember who was writing X-Men at the time, but I found X-Men compared to some of the other stuff I was reading, like Spider-Man, for example, was very wordy.
Yeah.
And it bored me a bit actually. Like I like this pace of like Spider-Man versus X-Men. So I think that's why I fell more into the Spider-Man camp of
Mhm.
writing. So when like Brian Michael Bendis started writing like Avengers, that's when I started getting into Avengers
Oh
because
yeah, for
he writes in
for
that style that I like.
yeah, for sure. I mean, people have to realize that the writer, they're just as important as the artist because even if you're writing out an action scene, you got to be able to find a way to write that and pace it quickly where the artist is going to be able
Mhm.
to understand how you want that to be drawn out. And as I always say, even outside of horror comics, if the artwork could tell a story without having the text bubbles, then you're doing a great job as just a writer on creating that scene.
Mhm. I found there was, and I didn't know this because I have no other writers at the time. I had no other writers to talk to about this.
Mhm.
But I've recently joined the lesser known comics group, so there's a bunch of writers there, so I can talk to them and listen to their stories. They
Yeah.
have a group that meets every 2 weeks. But w- when I write my descriptions for my panels, because I'm working with Marco Leone, who's the artist for the book, he's in Italy, so. And so there is a bit of a language barrier when it comes to him reading my dialogue and him getting, picking up on those North American nuances of speech, right?
Oh
Because
yeah, for
if
sure.
he's taking it into like a Google Translate and translating it, he's going to lose something. So in the description for the bubbles, I'm very descriptive. It's like, I want a 3/4 down shot, full body so we can see all this. And I want the expression on his face to be like this. I want his hands to be like, I try to be descriptive if it requires that. Like, I don't want to be too controlling. I want to give him some, obviously control of his own artwork,
Yeah,
but
for
I
sure.
direct the panel based on the mood. So I put all the notes that reflect the mood. So sometimes
Mhm.
I'll like Jack, the main character, will say something, but it's supposed to be like he's nervous, but he'll or frightened, but
Mhm.
he'll draw it like Jack is saying it like he's angry, assertive, because he missed that little nuance in the dialogue, which makes sense because like he speaks better English. I speak no Italian, so
Yeah, yeah,
he's doing great. So I'll send sometimes faces to him of like Sokka from Avatar from the animated series.
yeah.
There's a lot of
Mhm.
good facial reference from him, and a lot of Jack's, which Jack is one of my main character for So-Called Living. A lot of his facial expressions line up with kind of like Sokka's personality. So I'll
Mhm.
send him images of like Sokka doing this face, like, "Eh," and I was like, that's the face I want Jack to make. Then he's like, he gets it. Then he draws it. He's like, Marco's great. He's great.
Yeah.
He's quick. He's got a great personality to his artwork. And once we started working on book two, then our flow, like, it improved. So like the art in
Mhm.
book two is better than the art in book one. Like Marco's, he's been improving as he goes.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing artwork for sure. It kind of has like that old school, like Cartoon Network vibe to it in a
Yeah,
way,
yeah.
really like about that.
It's
If you
got a
grew
bit
up
of
in like the 90s or what that, or even like, I'm trying to remember that comic book that became a movie. I can't remember, but go ahead. It'll come to me.
it's got a bit of a Roberto Ramos, like Deviant. That was an old comic.
Yeah.
Roberto, when he
Mhm.
started, which like in the 90s, when he became really popular, and he
Yeah.
had comics like Deviant, and he's still doing comics now. He's a great artist. If I get ever work with Roberto, that'd be awesome. Big
Right.
fan.
So when you found your artist and everything, was there did you want that style or do you let him come up with the idea of how he wanted to present it?
Well, it's interesting. I actually looked for a particular, like when I wrote my story, I'm a strong believer that there's a certain art style that um I guess is complementary to the writing style and to the story and to the atmosphere.
For sure.
And the first time I got that was reading like a Daredevil comic. I can't remember. The story was it was shortly after like Kingpin died. This was what, years ago. Kingpin died, and then
Mhm.
people were fighting for position. Underboss. It was the Underboss story, I believe is what it was called. And it was a very dark, scratchy. I can't remember what the artist's name is, and I didn't really like that style in like say a Spider-Man book. But when I read it in this Underboss, I was like, wow, the feeling, the heaviness, the seriousness of that art style with this story was excellent. So
Oh,
from
for
that
sure.
day forward, I was like, I need somebody that fits a style that fits my artwork. So I set out to find somebody that drew like Ramos,
Mhm.
and then I found Marco after a while. Like at first I just put a call out to like, I'm looking for artists, and a lot of the artists I got replies that I got replies from were anime artists, like anime style artists, like they like manga, like that. It's very popular, that teen romantic manga style. Like
Yeah.
that, you see a lot of that, and I have nothing against that
Especially
style,
on
but it
especially
is
on
not.
webtoons and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's like with that webtoon style, but that style's fine. I have nothing against that style, but it doesn't fit so-called living at
Mhm.
all. Like that's not how I envisioned it.
Yeah,
So I wanted it to be a certain way, or like I had a window. Like Ramos was my ideal style for it, but
for sure.
I had like there's some wiggle room. But I found Marco, and he was perfect. So
Mhm. Awesome. Now, with so-called living, before we get into the plot and everything, what really made you come up with the idea in the first place on the whole story?
well, I've always wanted to create a world where kind of anything is possible. Everything exists, right?
Yeah.
Which is, I guess, like the Marvel universe, DC, most comic book universes, anything can happen, right? But I wanted to create my own, and I wanted a world where like vampires, werewolves, zombies were commonplace, but not hiding in the shadows. Like you could have a werewolf barista, or um, vampires come to your birthday party. It's like they're part of society. So instead of like we still have race, we have
Mhm.
white people, black people, Chinese people, etc. But that is not the that is not how I guess society sees people. So there's everybody like how we see race, so-called
Yeah.
living sees like the vampire race, the werewolf race, the
Mhm.
zombie race. Like that's they see those classifications of like monsters as races. But I don't have anything specifically drawn. It's not like,
So it's
oh,
based around the whole, so the whole world is like that, and not
yeah,
just the city. Okay.
exactly. The whole world has accepted all of it.
Yeah.
But it's not like I don't have like a race attached to something. Like I'm not going to say like, oh, vampires represent this class of people. They don't. It's just like vampires are vampires, but that's who they are. Like vampires do act like vampires, but it's not a reflection of like anybody in our society. If you know what I
Okay.
mean. I
I
wasn't
gotcha.
like these are white people, these are black people in my comic, these
No,
are Chinese people in
no,
my comic.
I was just asking because I have a horror comic, but all my characters take place in a hidden city outside of the world because the world wants to like shun them because they're monsters. But I'll talk to you more about that. It's all about you right now.
No, yeah, and what I've realized after I wrote it, because it was only recently I was describing it to somebody, and I said it's kind of like True Blood, like the show,
Okay,
but
gotcha.
in True Blood, the vampires are still hidden and they're still like hunted, and you know what I mean. They're still
Yeah.
like so it's closer to True Blood, but they're out in the open. But people aren't as serious and dark. They're not like, oh my god, we're vampires. We gotta have a special cult, and like we gotta live in secret, and we have secret societies. Like
Yeah.
if there's like a vampire bar or a werewolf bar, it's open. They'll have signs like, vampires 50% discount. Like that's
Okay, I gotcha.
so
That's cool.
it's they're out in the open.
Awesome. So that's pretty much the plot of the story. Like with Jack, I read in the description that he's a vampire. Like exactly go into detail without without giving too much away. What's so special or different about him in this whole world?
Well, yeah. So Jack, I can give you this part away because the first issue is actually available for free on Global Comics,
Oh, okay.
so anybody can go read it right now. And it starts off pretty quick. Like the Jack starts off as a human,
Hmm.
and so I'll wrap this up, so I won't spoil anything that happens in between. But the main event that kicks off the story is Jack was a human, got turned into a vampire, but now he's learning to live his life as a vampire. But instead of like your typical vampire stories that you see on like like Vampire Diaries, where like, oh my god, now I have to feed this hunger that I don't want to feed, blah blah blah
Yeah.
blah. Like there's that deep. Jack's first issue is like, I can't get into my apartment because I'm a vampire, and basically the whole rule, like you have to be invited in,
Oh,
but
yeah.
there's nobody
Gotcha.
to invite him into his own apartment. And there's like this into the apartment complex. There's like a
Hmm.
no vampire sign there. So basically, vampires are not invited into that complex.
Okay.
And so that's his first issue as a vampire. He's like, I have to deal with. I'm a homeless vampire now. I can't get into my apartment. And then in issue 2, he continues to deal with a new issue, so he's trying to adapt, but he's still living his life as like, I'm a normal person, so I'm gonna wake up during the day and like walk outside into the sun, not thinking about like the consequences because he's not used to being a vampire, right? So you
So,
got to
so
imagine this guy.
basically, it's almost like a dark comedy with a slice of life in a
Yeah,
way.
exactly. It is a dark comedy. So the title itself, like so-called living, is Jack has to get used to this new way of living. But as a
Mhm.
vampire, you're technically dead. So
Yeah,
it's like so-called life. He's getting he's getting used to this so-called living, and everything in his life has changed. And his friends are going to help him out as he kind of fumbles his way through this. But in addition to the quirkiness of this, because it's not just a bumbling comedy. It's more of a dark comedy because it deals with some dark issues, but in a light sarcastic manner. But
mhm,
Jack gets himself tied up into some like serious situations that I won't spoil.
gotcha.
So, but he is a bit of a bumbling idiot, and he gets way in over his head into
Mhm,
some serious situations. So
gotcha. And I've seen that you, if I'm not mistaken, do you have the comic also on Webtoons?
yeah, I put it on there, and admittedly, I forgot it was on there.
Gotcha.
Because when I first decided to share it, I was like, I think it's on Drive Through Comics too. Now that you bring that
Yeah.
up, so
Now,
I
with
try to
you
share it.
as the comic creator and everything, how do you like? I have my comic that I'm creating on Tapas and not Webtoons,
Mhm.
but with creating the comic and then putting it on Webtoons, how do you approach to convince a buyer why you should buy my book if I could just read it online for free?
So the idea is issue one is always going to be available for free, and that's the only one
Gotcha.
that's online. I'm running a Kickstarter that's actually launches March 26th, so in a few weeks, and the Kickstarter is for books 1 and 2.
Okay.
So basically, I'm giving you half the Kickstarter for free to read, but when you back it, you need to back books 1 and 2. So it's think of it as like here's a book, I'll let you read half, and if you want the rest, you have to buy the series, right?
Gotcha.
Because I wanted people to feel confident in the story that I was writing, because there's a lot of indie books there, and I get the fear with buying into indie books because there's a lot of people that do buy into indie books.
Hmm.
Thank you, but I understand the fear of going into it because you're like, I don't know this world, I don't know these characters, I don't know what to expect. Do I want to put my money on something that I don't know what I'm going to get? So I thought, well, I'm going to give you the first issue for free. You can just read the first issue, and then if you like it, support me by buying issues 1 and 2 on Kickstarter. And then
Gotcha.
from then on, then I can do issues 3 and 4. And then I'll do a Kickstarter for those. And if those get funded, then I can do 5 and 6, etc. There's 8 books planned for the series. So
Awesome.
the idea is I can continue doing this if you like it, but I need to fund the first 2 books
Oh
before I
yeah,
can
for
do the other
sure.
ones. So
Yeah,
sorry,
because
go
I
ahead.
know some people with web comics, they'll put the whole comic out there, and then once that uh like the first issue's done, then they'll put in a physical book. But I like the way you're thinking because you're not trying to put all your eggs in one basket, but you want the people to be interested because sometimes it is a hit and miss. Some people are willing not to spend that extra money to have a physical book, but at the same time, I mean, why not? Because it's just great to open up the pages like that instead of just going on your phone to read something.
Yeah, like I'm a physical book guy. Like I did go through a stint where I did digital for a long time,
Mhm.
but that's just because my collection got large. Like if you're familiar with a full length bin, like
Oh yeah.
they hold about what 200 books, something like that. I
Mhm.
have 40, it's like 42 or 46 of those.
Wow.
So I had to stop buying physical comic books. I'm back into it again, but I took a hiatus for a while
Hmm.
and I was just buying digital. And digital is a bit dangerous too because I got into comicsology
Oh
before
yeah.
that was before like Marvel Unlimited or the DC whatever that's called. I can't remember. Is it DC whatever? Anyways, those before I got into those, I was buying comicsology books on sale. So it's like, oh, Batman books are 50 cents. So I would just buy a bunch of them. Or,
Hmm.
X-Men books are this. And I would just keep buying anything that was on sale. But I think there's a subscription system for comicsology now, but not in Canada. So
Gotcha.
because I'm Canadian, and it's not. We don't even have an option. Or I would have taken that.
Right. Now with the whole dark comedy, with approaching that, when you had the artists basically create the vampires and the werewolves, was there a certain, you talked a little bit, but like was there a certain way you wanted these creatures to look like in more detail? Because, pop culture, you had so many werewolves and so many vampires designed in a certain way. Was there like a certain movie or like anything like that where it's like, okay, this movie, that's the type of vampires I want to see in my world?
Well, that the vampires, like the characters themselves,
Hmm.
I directed like I sent them character pages. I sent
Okay.
Marco character pages that basically had like, well, here's their personality, etc., their heights, type of clothes they wear. But I also had visual images. For example, Nick, who is one of the main vampires in the story, I sent him images of like Lobo from DC
Oh, okay.
Comics. So
Gotcha.
like not the new like what the new 52 did to Lobo
No,
is
old school Lobo.
old school Lobo. The Lobo everybody actually likes. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? So
exactly.
I sent them that Lobo and I was like, Nick is basically like Lobo, but he looks human, but he's like this big, bulky guy, but his attitude is very much like Lobo. But I didn't set out like pick Lobo and I was like, I want to make Lobo a vampire. I
Yeah.
made the Nick character and I was like, who's closest to this? And I was like, oh, Lobo. So I
Hmm.
sent images of Lobo. I was like, Nick is like this. But I was like, I don't need Nick to have a six pack. I want him to be like muscular. But then I sent him another picture of like this bodybuilder who's like he's ripped on top, but he's got a bit of a gut. And I was like, I kind of like that. It's like, I work out, but I don't like diet and count my carbs. So
Oh yeah,
he's
for
like
sure.
this big, intimidating guy, but he doesn't have like a six pack, right?
Yeah.
And his personality, which like I wrote this book and I wrote these character descriptions like 15, 16 years ago.
Oh wow.
And I sent them to Marco now, but I've updated it since because Nick's style is exactly Butcher from The Boys, from the TV show.
Okay. Uh,
So that's Nick's personality exactly. I remember first time I like watched The Boys, and then I went back to read my scripts, and I looked at my wife, and I was like, "Butcher is Nick. Like that's exactly it. That's his personality is Nick's personality."
mhm.
So yeah, I sent them all. Like Jack's girlfriend is based on this obscure reference. I think her name is Autumn from. Did you ever watch Third Rock from the Sun?
Oh, of course.
So the youngest brother, I can't remember what the young kid who's the biggest. He's a huge actor now. I can't remember his name is. Jason. Is it Jason Hewitt. Love. No, that's the girl.
Yeah.
But there's the guy who played the young. I can't remember his name. That actor. He dated a girl in that show, and I think her name was Autumn, and she had like kind of like straw straight, like she had straight hair, and it was like the straw blonde, and she was very like very demanding, very commanding, take no
Mhm.
shit personality.
Yeah.
But she also came off as a bit of a bitch. But
Gotcha.
just because he was a little weak-willed compared to her, so he just like if he ever tried to stand up to her, she just slap him down. But
Mhm.
that was Jill in my so-called living book, and so Jack would be more like him.
And what age
So
is the character based around?
sorry.
What's the age of Jack?
Oh, the age of Jack. Jack is he's like mid to late 20s.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Gotcha.
And his personality is like he's a bit of a coward. He'll like talk big man in front of his friends, but he just talks shit. But he's not afraid to say he's a coward. So,
Okay, gotcha.
but yeah, that's him. He's if he gets into conflict, his natural reaction is to flee. And if you read the first issue, that's how he gets into trouble to begin with. It's that situation of like boyfriend girlfriend go to a bar. Girlfriend
Mhm.
starts picking a fight with a guy that's twice the size of her boyfriend, and
Yeah.
boyfriend's the one that has to pay the price. That's the situation of book one.
Okay.
So Jill is like, you know, basically gets into it with some vampires. It's like, you guys are assholes, blah blah blah. And Jack's like, all right, time to go.
Right.
He's trying to diffuse the situation because he's like, if this goes bad, it's going to go bad for me, not for you. So let's go.
Mhm.
So
That's cool. Now, for a lot of people out there who haven't really decided to do it, to me personally, I find horror and comedy could work really well together. I mean, there's so many movies out there, especially from the 80s. And I'll ask you that question a little bit more after we're done talking about the comic. But with the dark horror, how would you, dark comedy, how would you tell someone who wants to start off with their first comic with that type of genre? How would you approach to tell the audience how to find a fine line of the comedy and then still have it dark at the same time?
Well, I'll tell them, like, imagine, you got stories of like decapitation, people running
Mhm.
from zombies. You got those typical horror, tropes, the things that make a horror book a horror book.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, imagine it's being played by the cast of Friends.
Yeah.
So think of it like the comedy style is more in tune to that of like the sitcom Friends, but imagine, like, they get into a situation where they come across a real vampire
Mhm.
and how they would react. So it's an easy read. So I guess I would describe it to somebody like it's an easy read. And if you like ensemble comedies like Friends, where it's like you can relate to these characters, they're going through things that you go through in your life, but it's kind of like they make it comical,
Yeah.
but not kind of over the top, so you can relate to them. So all the characters, I try to make all the characters relatable. They're going through some things that you would go through, or maybe not you, but other people would go through, but they go through
Mhm.
it in a comical type of way. So I'd say it's an easy read. It's got the it's got the dark aspects of comedy without taking itself too seriously. I don't know if that
Awesome.
answers your question.
No, for sure. Most definitely. Because, when a lot of people say dark comedies, it could be vague. Because some of the greatest dark comedies, a lot of them came from the 80s. You had Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Love that movie. The Monster Squad. Love that movie.
Love Monster Squad.
And even like Far Out, like they made a cartoon series out of it, but it was really cheesy. Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. Yes, I'm
Mhm.
showing my age. But classic stuff. But we're about into the half hour mark. I don't know if you want to talk more about your comic, because usually halfway into the show, I like for to ask people questions just so the audience could get to know the writer better. And
Mhm.
most people who write dark comedies or have write anything about vampires, monsters, anything like that, they're most of the time they're fan of like the horror genre or like things of horror. So yeah,
All right. Okay. So I'll say one last thing about so-called living, and then
yeah,
I'm up to answer all the questions. We can go totally off the rails. I'm totally okay with that.
awesome.
But yeah, other than reminding people that you can follow so-called living now on Kickstarter. Just type in so-called living or so space. It's important that there's a space or a dash between the word so and called, or Kickstarter won't find it. But
And it's in the description of the video for anybody else that wants to know. I got your link tree, I got your YouTube channel, think I got your Instagram and the Kickstarter.
Oh, great. Yeah. So you can follow now and you'll be notified when it goes live on March 26th. But again, and go to Global Comics with an X. That's comics with an X, and look up So Called Living. And oh, yeah, it's written on the screen. It's right here. But yeah, go to Global Comics and just check out So Called Living and just read it for yourself. It's free. You don't have to pay anything. Or you can go to
Awesome.
Webtoons. It's available on Webtoons too.
Yeah. So now into the questionnaires.
Right.
So with horror and everything, before we get into the dark comedy that I want to ask, what is your favorite horror movie of all time and why?
I have so many. It's hard to
Oh yeah,
choose one. But the first one, I'm just gonna say the first one that came to my mind, and that was The Exorcist, the original
the
Exorcist.
original one. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, gotcha.
And actually, a better version of the original Exorcist is they re-released it and they added a deleted scene of Reagan coming down doing a spider walk down the stairs. That's my favorite version.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So
And now into the dark comedy. You write a dark comedy.
mhm.
What is your favorite dark comedy horror movie and why?
Oh, good question. Good question. You mentioned Monster Squad. Monster Squad is a classic. I loved watching
Yeah.
that when I was a kid. Um, but that's tough. Like, would you consider like Ghostbusters a
Oh
dark
yeah, for
comedy?
sure, for
So
sure.
I go Ghostbusters would be my favorite.
Yeah, the original Ghostbusters,
Yeah, yeah.
I definitely consider that a dark comedy. I mean, there's things in that literally cover death and everything else, so why not, you know? Because
So yeah,
even
uh,
this past Christmas, I had someone on the show and we talked about Gremlins because in the first Gremlins, it takes place on Christmas Eve and people die in that movie. So yeah.
loved Gremlins too.
Oh yeah.
So sorry, Gremlins as well, not Gremlins 2.
Yeah.
Gremlins as well.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'd say Ghostbusters would be top of that list. I could not. I could watch Ghostbusters anytime. You put it on right now, I'll watch Ghostbusters from
Oh
beginning to
yeah,
end.
for sure.
It's
I
so
mean,
great.
I don't know where I could find it on YouTube, but YouTube actually has a channel where they have like all of the episodes of the original Ghostbusters cartoon from the
Love
80s.
I love that cartoon. So here's a little story about the Ghostbusters cartoon. I used to watch Army of Darkness. Army
Yeah.
of Darkness is excellent. That's
I,
that's a really good one too. That would be on
I-
my list as well. Um, but the Ghostbusters cartoon, I don't know if you remember this, but there used to be these Saturday morning specials or these specials that it was like Friday evening before the Saturday morning, before the new run of cartoons started. And they'd have
yeah.
these specials that were like, oh, these like there was one with Saved by the Bell, and they
Mhm.
were like they were running to these situations where they're being teleported or talking about all these cartoons that are coming up. I was like, oh, all these new cartoons are coming to Saturday morning.
Yeah.
And that was great. And I saw one for the Ghostbusters, like
Yeah.
the real Ghostbusters, because there's like two Ghostbusters cartoons, but the real Ghostbusters based on the
Yeah.
movie.
Not the one with the monkey.
Yeah, not the one with the monkey. So the real Ghostbusters, and that was coming out, and I was like, oh, I love Ghostbusters, can't wait for this cartoon.
Hmm.
And then it never showed up. And then I looked I looked for it everywhere and I found the Ghostbusters, the one with the monkey. I was like, that's not it. Because in Canada, it didn't release at the same time as it did in the States.
Oh man.
So I was just like being teased by these American commercials that
Right.
I couldn't watch it. I was like, this sucks. But
But
then
I mean,
finally,
it was special though because you would have like at least I remember watching the cartoon, drinking my high C Slimer orange juice.
yeah, I still have Ghostbusters toys.
Oh
I
yeah, that's awesome.
Like I
Classic.
have the screaming Egon and Janine, the one where you scream, their hair goes out, their eyes pop out of their head.
Yeah,
I've got Ecto One. I've got the skeleton ghost that traps them. I've got a bunch of Ghostbuster toys.
awesome. Pretty cool. So now going into, more of the scare factor and stuff. And I think personally, like at the playground, kids, they be like, oh, my favorite superhero store, and mine's is Captain America or Batman. Batman will beat up Captain America, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But now as adults, or when we become teenagers, we shift to what horror villain will kick whose butt. So out of all the 80s slashers, who is your favorite 80s slasher and why?
Slashers, eh? I'm gonna go with Jason.
Okay.
I'm a
Gotcha.
Jason fan. Jason is like the first slasher movie that I watched that I was rooting for Jason. You're like, get him, Jason.
Yeah.
But you're okay if they
Gotcha.
die. You're like, get him good. Maybe the first movie you're like, oh no, you almost got it. Who you just made it. But you watch enough of them and you're rooting for Jason. You're like, yeah, get him.
Yeah. Did you ever play the video game?
No, I didn't. I did not.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
played I played Splatterhouse, which was the Friday 13th ripoff back in like the early 90s. I think it was
Yeah,
early.
because I know a couple years back, I was big on playing the Friday the 13th video game. I wanted to play more as Jason and the survivors. That's
Was it
kind of
any,
I feel like
I want to play Dying Light. I haven't
yeah.
played that yet.
Well, like that's a great thing because video games is so much coming out. Like I don't know if you know, but they have like a Killer Clowns from Outer Space game coming out where you could either play as the clowns killing everybody or play as survivors trying to kill the clowns and save the town. So yeah, but that goes into the next question. Growing up as a kid or even as a young adult, was there a horror video game franchise that you were a big fan of?
My favorite horror video game franchise was Resident Evil for sure.
Okay, gotcha.
So
Most people's favorite.
yeah, I liked Silent Hill too. Sorry, Silent Hill as well. I keep saying two because there's so many sequels, but I mean, like I like the Silent Hill series. That'd be probably my second.
Gotcha.
So, oh, actually, no, that's a lie. So I like Resident Evil, but here, I don't find this one as scary, even though it falls into the horror genre. But Last of Us,
Okay, yeah.
Last of Us,
Gotcha.
like the story in that, the cinematography, the
Mhm.
game is impeccable. So Last of Us, I would have to put at the top of my list, and then followed by the Resident Evil series. Originally, it was
Oh,
Resident Evil, but Last of Us has taken it because it's such a great story.
yeah, gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I'm an old school clock tower guy,
Mhm.
and there's just something cool about that. And then I don't know if you ever played the Left 4 Dead franchise. That was pretty good.
Left 4 Dead is I played so much Left 4 Dead. It was
Yeah.
fantastic. It's like
Yeah,
once you add that player,
especially when they came out where you could actually play as the infected versus the people. That was fun.
yeah. The favorite effect that I like to play was as the I forgot what his name, the guy with the tonguer, he's like pull you toward him.
Uh,
Like
Smoker.
is the smoker? Is that he's the one that has the tongue and he pulls you towards him?
Yeah, I think so because he always had a cough. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't, there was that one because I remember I loved watching my friends panic and
Yeah,
they're in a group and you just pick one out and you pull them and you're dragging them toward you.
yeah. Because you had
And
the boomer, the hunter, the smoker, the tank, and then the witch. Yeah.
yeah. So that was my favorite one. It was the one where you yank them, you pull them toward you. But I played a lot of
Yeah.
Left 4 Dead, like the first one and the second one. Was there a third one? Is there a third
Uh,
one?
I can't remember. I don't think so. But I don't
Okay, I
know if
played
you
one and
ever
two.
seen the movie Cabin in the Woods.
Okay, it's amazing.
If you pause the scene where it shows all the creatures in the cells, you will actually see Left 4 Dead characters. You will see the boomer, the witch,
Oh
because
yeah,
before Left 4 Dead, that company went
yeah.
bankrupt. They were actually going to create a level that was based off of Cabin in the Woods.
Nice. Yeah, Cabin in the Woods is amazing. It's right up
Yeah.
there. As far as dark comedies go, that's up there.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I love watching them. That's another movie I'd watch anytime.
Yeah. Now, was there ever a horror movie that you're like, okay, this is just a little bit too far. This isn't my style? Because, people, as I see it, like if you're a horror writer, you're always going to have your likes and dislikes because I always say that the beautiful thing about horror is that there's always subgenres. So if you're not good at writing slashers, you could be good at writing like a sci-fi space comic
Mhm.
or a comedy or anything like that.
I don't think I have a genre of horror movies I don't like. I just don't like poorly written horror movies. Like I had a lot of fun watching the original like Child's Play movies,
Yeah,
but the new ones are just garbage. I can't get through a single movie. There's so many garbage versions of the
gotcha.
new like and so yeah, I think I like them all. And you mentioned space, like Event Horizon.
Oh yeah.
That
Oh
was
my gosh.
amazing. I
Such
loved
a
Event
good movie.
Horizon. That's such a great horror movie.
Yeah.
So, like, I like the serious stuff. I like the dark comedies, and there's so many things. I think Paranormal Activities. That movie messed me up the most.
Mhm.
It's like I was afraid to sleep without my leg out. Like I'm afraid to watch that movie now. The only reason I haven't watched it again because I'm afraid I won't sleep for another 6 months. It
Gotcha.
like I couldn't let my legs slip out from under the covers. If you watch that movie, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And that movie messed me up the most. It
Mhm.
scared the hell out of me.
Gotcha. That's cool. Was there ever a horror movie that you were like you turned off just because it's one of those things that some people, when they watch horror movies, they want to be scared. They want to have that shock value, that suspense. But then some people are turned off by the whole like too much gore or just the gross factor. So was there ever a movie or a franchise you're like, okay, this isn't my taste?
No, I just binge watched all the Saw movies recently.
Gotcha.
So no, I binge watched them, and right after that, I binge watched all the Final Destinations. So
Yeah.
I just watched them. There's probably some like parts in Saw where the only way I'd look away is because you start feeling it. You're like,
Yeah.
and but you're looking through the cracks of your fingers, not really looking away.
Gotcha.
Just
Like
you're
with me, I watched the first one, but I know they came out with multiple ones. But even the first one, I kind of not watched the whole thing through. But there's some people out there that are fans of the Human Centipede. I'm just not a fan of it.
Well, the only part, like, I watched the Human Centipede, and I set myself up for being like, I didn't want to watch forever,
Yeah.
and I forgot. Yeah, you mentioned a good one because I was like, that seems gross. Don't want to watch it. I have no interest. No interest. I heard people talking about it, and then one day I was like, oh, sorry, I had a hiccup. One day I was just like, I'm gonna just watch the Human Centipede. What the hell? And I watched it, and it was disturbing, but I still watched it, and
Mhm.
I could watch it again. The only part that I'm worried about seeing again in that movie is not, you've seen it, right? You've seen Human
Yeah.
Centipede?
Mhm.
The baby in the car.
Yes.
That part, that that came out of nowhere. That was so random.
Mhm.
And that part was the part that was like, I don't need to see that part again.
Gotcha. Yeah,
So I
I
think
hear
when
you.
it has to do with like you actually see like harm coming to babies, that seems a little far.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, that's why horror movies have like their tropes on things that you should do and shouldn't do.
Yeah, and you usually don't see that. That's probably one of the few cases I've seen where you actually see like there's suggested violence to children, and you've
Yeah.
seen children doing violence to other children.
Oh yeah, for
But
sure.
that was just that was probably too far. There you go. If you go my limit, that's my limit. That was too far.
Yeah.
I didn't turn it off, but I did look away. I was like, I don't need to see it. I saw it once. I'd probably turn away and then continue watching the rest of the disgusting movie.
Mhm. Yeah. Now with talking about horror movies and stuff like that, out of the classic Universal monsters, Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, who would be your favorite?
Hmm. Uh, Dracula. I like his ability to manipulate humans. But if you're looking at like from the ones you mentioned, Dracula. But as
Mhm.
far as like classic monsters, would be zombies. I'm a
Yeah.
huge zombie fan. I love zombie movies. I love zombie games, board games, video games. So like I can't get enough of zombies.
And I mean, some zombie movies have the best comedy too. You know.
Mhm. And there's people keep finding new ways to do zombie things. I know people are like, zombies are done because zombies went through their phase, and people are like, I'm sick of zombie movies. It's like kind of like what superheroes are going through. I'm tired of superhero movies. But I've never gotten tired of superhero or zombie movies. Bring them all. Like
Gotcha.
I haven't seen all the Walking Dead TV like seasons, so I stopped at some point and never got back into it. I will, I just haven't. But I did read all the comics until its finality, so I know what happens in the comics.
Yeah, I mean, people think, like you said, people think, oh, zombies are overrated, superheroes are overrated. But, there's always that one little thing that you could twist to make it interesting to get the reader to want to read it. Because, I mean, just look at pop culture. You've had zombies that can run really fast. You could have zombies that are actually intelligent in ways, you know, but it's just about sitting down and finding something that you could reel it in because as an analogy, you go fishing, you always know that you're going to catch a fish, but there's always that chance you're going to catch a different fish on that day. So yeah, it's just as a writer and as a creator trying to find a way to make your little mark in the world, even if it's not that big of a mark.
Well, if that's one thing about so-called living is our zombies are very different, and you'll see that on page one. Our zombie situation is very different. You'll see that on page one, and you'll see more of that in book two. And all our characters are different. Our werewolves are like you'll recognize them as werewolves. They still go through the same werewolf things, but they're different. And I don't want to ruin it because that doesn't show up until later in the series.
Awesome, awesome. Now with the Kickstarter and everything, go back to that a little. Do you have just the comic or do you have different tiers? Because with some people they try to do, oh, you'll get a one of a kind artwork, or you might get some buttons, some stickers. Like, do you have anything selling on the Kickstarter besides the comic itself?
Well, the first when I put together the Kickstarter, I did a lot of research, and I don't have a lot of like I've never ran a Kickstarter myself, but I've done
Mhm.
a lot of videos for um board game Kickstarters, because part of our channel, people will give us like do a playthrough, do a review, do a preview, and or how to play, and we'll do those videos for them, and they'll put them on their channel. So from that aspect, and as a buyer, I've backed over 160 projects on Kickstarter already. So I've backed a lot. So I have a lot as kind of like an outsider looking in, person interacting, like a user of Kickstarter. But I don't have experience from behind the scenes. But what I liked is when I built the page, I noticed that comic book Kickstarters in general, for me, like there's a lot of successful ones that do this where they have tons of tiers. I have like 18, 22 tiers. And I was like, wow, that's a lot of tiers. For me, it's confusing. Where board games, they have like 3 to 5 tiers. Yeah. And some of those tiers are just like an all-in is the 5th tier. So it's not even really variety. It's just like you can get everything here. But I found the comic book ones confusing for me. There was so many tiers, too many options, and it kind of turned me off, like scared me away as a user. So I didn't want that experience, and I wanted to. So I set my page up and my Kickstarter up more how like board games do, and I'm trying to introduce that to comic books and keep it simple. So I do have 5 tiers, and my tiers are: I have the digital only tier. Then I have my standard tier, which is the standard covers drawn by Marco Leone, the artist who did the books, who did the inside art. And every other tier you get, the digital is included. So the standard tier, you'll get the standard covers for book 1 and 2 with the digital version with the standard covers. The third tier is the elite covers, and that's guest artists. Derek Loffman, who he runs a lot of Kickstarters. He's got his own series. He's done work for Marvel. He's like I said, he's got plenty of successful Kickstarters. He's got a really vibrant Instagram community. Like, he's a great artist. So, and he's a friend of mine. So he did one of the elite covers, and then there's the other elite cover is for book 2, and that's Ashton Techno Prasad, who's a photographer in Toronto, and he takes pictures of Toronto. He's a brilliant photographer, and I'm from Toronto, even though I don't live there right now. I was born and raised there, and so I wanted to use his art, and since it's like my city, I wanted to put it on the cover of So-Called Living and make it like that's kind of give ideas like, oh, this is the city of where So-Called Living takes place, even though it's not. Okay. So there's a mix of Toronto and New York, but so let me get those through. So digital tier, standard cover tier, elite cover tier. That's the 2 covers I described. And then I have a obligatory sex pot edition. Get back to that in a second. And the 5th tier is the all-in. So if somebody wants all the different covers, so if they want 6 books, which are 2 different books with 3 different covers each, they can get the all-in tier. Now, so back to the obligatory sex pot edition. During my research of like what is a successful book on Kickstarter, I couldn't help but notice that a lot of them are sexy, big-breasted women in bikinis in space. There's like so many of them are that, and I have nothing against that, but that's not what I write. Right. Those just aren't the books I write. But I get that sex sells. I understand that concept. I have nothing against it. People do it. If you do it and you can make a living off it, then keep doing it. If people keep buying it, keep doing it. Yeah. It's not hurting anybody, right? So I was talking to my wife, and I was looking at this and being like, a lot of these books are doing well. If you look at the top grossing ones, there's so many there. Like Lady Death's got a lot of those spots, but so many there are just big booby women in bikinis and guns and whatever and making out with each other. There's a lot in there. It's basically soft core porn, and sometimes not always that soft. So so I thought, but my book, like So-Called Living, there's nothing sexy about So-Called Living. Everybody's very average. Like it's just as sexy as you going to the corner store. It's it's not a sexy situation.
Well, you're saying, it's hard because you can have a great comic, great artwork, but if a person sees your front cover and your front cover isn't selling it to them, they're not going to buy it in the first place. So that front cover is everything to that potential buyer in the beginning.
The art will lure the buyers in. and the writing keeps them in there.
Exactly.
So the obligatory sex pot editions, what I have is for books 1 and 2, there are, and I actually have a badge for this. It's called the obligatory sex pot edition badge that I put on the covers. And it's kind of like tongue in cheek, having fun with the idea that the most successful books on Kickstarter are these sexy books. Or not the most successful, but like a large number of the successful books on Kickstarter are these sexy comic books. So I am having fun with that. So I took two female characters from each book, and I made sexy versions of them, and I put them on the cover. And they're like crazy sexy versions. like they don't look like, they look as much like the character in the book as, say, when you go to a Comic Con and you see like a sexy cosplay for SpongeBob. You know what I mean? You see it. People do it. It's like, and I'm in like a yellow bikini. I got spots and I got square pants, but like I still look very sexy in this outfit. And that's how I took the covers. That's how we took 2 of the regular covers and 2 of the regular characters. We made them like sexy versions. We put them on the covers. We call it the sex pot editions. And we have a little blurb in the description saying that it's, part of the time-honored tradition of Kickstarter books of having like beautiful women gracing the covers of their comic. So, and that's a limited run. We only have 300 issues of the sex pot editions. So when they're gone, they're gone. There's no more of those. I'm not printing any more of those. So it's just a limited run of those. And I thought I'd just have fun with it because I'm not offended by sexy covers, and I don't think anybody else should be. If that's what you like, then buy it. And our book doesn't have sexy content inside, but if you like the covers and that's what you want, then buy them. But if you don't, no need to leave hate. Just go buy the other covers. We have every other tier has nothing sexy about it. Just beautiful artwork, nothing sexy. So I like something for everyone.
Yeah, I really like that whole idea of what you set up because, not out there, because I have a lot of friends, ones that have been on the shows. I've had friends that do like, oh, you could get this pop figure custom made. You could get this like 3D print of this item or a plushie. They're doing really great with them. They're selling them great, but I feel, and of course, the people that have done it, they've already like 6, 7 Kickstarters in. But I feel at times, if you're going to do your first Kickstarter, keep it as simple as possible. And variant covers, I believe, like what you're doing is the way, because at the same time, it could get hassling. I haven't done a Kickstarter myself, but, I could only imagine people are like, okay, this buyer, I have to remember to send them this variant cover, that variant cover, this plushie, this t-shirt. It can get very overwhelming at times, especially if you're doing it by yourself with the delivery and everything.
Yeah, that's part of it. So when I saw those other things, just even from I said it was like intimidating from a buyer's, but from behind the scenes where you have all these different prints and all these different things, there's 22 tiers, like keeping track of that would be like, oh, because those are all as add-ons. So I do have 2 add-ons as well.
Okay.
Reminded me, is one is simple, like for $5, I'll sign all the books in your tier. So if you get the all-in tier, I'll sign all 6 books. And all of this is like, obviously, if you meet me at a con, I'll sign your book for free. But it's since being Kickstarter, I'm trying to be as honest as like, I want you to help me make this series happen. And without you, I can't make it happen. So I'm not trying to gouge people. I'm trying to be honest, being like, I need funds to make these books happen. So the $5 autographing tier is something that would really help us out. Don't get it? That's absolutely fine. The other add-on we have is something we want to try to give to people and try to build a community. I don't have a sample. We have a sample here because we're making these ourselves. They're about smaller. Yeah, they're about that big. Where's the camera? They're about that big. And they're keychains of bunnies. So bunnies play a part in our story. You have to read. When I talk about it, you have to read the book to find out about that. But if you get the keychain, on the back of it, it's got a cute bunny on the front, and it's shaped like a bunny. If you flip it over, it says official member of the Blood Bunny Colony. And what that gets you is, other than it's $8, so you can get a cool keychain, and you'll be done. You'll be an official member of the Blood Bunny keychain. We'll keep your email on record of the colony. And what that's going to get you is on future Kickstarters, because it's going to be future so-called living Kickstarters, is you're going to get a discount on the next Kickstarter if you're a part of the Blood Bunny colony.
Awesome.
And that's something I want to do. It's kind of like a membership, like a Costco membership. You know what I mean? Like if you become a member, there's perks, but you don't know what those perks are until you go shopping. Because I don't honestly, there's no perks right now. If you buy it, it's perks for future Kickstarters.
Hey, there's
The only
nothing
perk
wrong
now
with that. I mean, I remember being you know, Planeteer when Captain Planet came out was big on that stuff. You know, I don't know if you ever remember that cartoon.
I do.
Yeah.
So I loved Captain Planet, but yeah, that's the idea. It's like I even mentioned in the description is like I can't tell you what the discounts are exactly at the moment, but at the very bare minimum, you get a handmade keychain of a cute bunny. It's a cute keychain. It's a cute keychain. So
Gotcha.
you're gonna get something regardless. But I am gonna give, because I already have like 8 books plotted out. Like if this Kickstarter funds, then it's good. The next one's gonna happen. So
Awesome. Well, talked about the comic, talked about questions related to horror, and we're about an hour in. So I think we'll end it there, but you are more than welcome to come back on anytime to promote more projects, or, you know, besides doing interviews on the show, I like to just bring on old guests and shoot the breeze by talking about, like, you know, random horror topics, like talk nothing about werewolves, vampires, or even talk about certain horror movies that's been out for a long time. Like I've talked about Resident Evil, but we could definitely sit down and talk about, you know, Silent Hill or anything like that whenever you have free time. And if you want to come on again, just shoot me a message.
yeah, I'm totally open to come on. And if you want to talk about horror movies, let me know which one ahead of time, because I don't watch as many anymore. Not because I don't like them, because my wife's afraid of them. So I watch movies with her, but she's afraid of horror movies, so we don't watch horror movies.
Gotcha.
But I love horror movies, but I haven't seen them. If I watch them, it's like by myself on my iPad when I'm washing dishes.
Yeah.
I'll prop it up in front of me and watch them.
Awesome. Well, it's been great to have you on the show. I hope the best for your Kickstarter, and thank you, Brittany and Christopher, for coming in the chats, and anybody else who's been watching, or anybody who watches it after the live feed. I hope you all have a good night. What was that?
Said thanks for having me on, and thanks for everybody who's watching.
Not a problem. Thank you for reaching out to me. All right. Night.
Okay. See ya.